What if the biggest scandal around Halle Berry was never about the men she dated, but about the way the world judged her for walking away? For decades, the internet has whispered the same brutal question. Why can't Halle Berry keep a man? And now, as Halle approaches 60, that old narrative has exploded all over again. But this time something feels different. Because Halle herself has been pushing back against the idea that a woman's worth is measured by how long she stays with the wrong man. And when she said in so many words, "Who says I wanted to keep him?" people suddenly realized the conversation had been twisted from the beginning. This isn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This is about fame, beauty, failed marriages, public humiliation, custody battles, childhood trauma, and the impossible standards placed on one of Hollywood's most iconic women. And yes, people are still obsessing over the younger men, the messy breakups, and the question everyone keeps asking: was Halle Berry unlucky in love? Or was she finally brave enough to stop choosing what almost destroyed her? Because once you look closely at her history, the real story becomes much darker, much deeper, and much more emotional than the headlines ever admitted. And by the end of this video, you may never see Halle Berry's love life the same way again. Halle Berry has always been more than just a Hollywood star. She was the beauty queen who crossed into acting, the actress who broke barriers, the Oscar winner who made history, the woman whose face became synonymous with elegance, power, and impossible glamour. But behind the red carpets, behind the magazine covers, and behind the billion-dollar image of the flawless Hollywood icon, there was a private life that kept becoming public in the most painful ways. And every time Halle's relationships collapsed, the public didn't just watch. They judged. Her first major relationship drama began before she was the Halle Berry the world knows today. Before the Oscar. Before the superhero roles. Before the global fame. Back then, she was still fighting to become somebody in an industry that devours people before it ever celebrates them. Then came the early relationships, the lawsuits, the accusations, the divorces, and the headlines. And with every breakup, the internet built a mythology around her. Not a kind one. Not a fair one. A cruel one. The idea was simple but vicious. If a woman as beautiful as Halle Berry couldn't keep a relationship, then something must be wrong with her. But here's what people rarely asked. What if the men were wrong for her? What if leaving was survival? What if the woman everyone accused of being too difficult was actually the only one brave enough to say, "I deserve better than this"? Her marriage to baseball star David Justice became one of the first major chapters in this public story. They looked glamorous. They looked powerful. They looked like the type of couple Hollywood could sell as perfect. But perfection cracked. Then came Eric Benet, and that relationship became even more painful because infidelity entered the public conversation. Suddenly, Halle wasn't just dealing with heartbreak privately. She was living through betrayal under a microscope. Imagine winning professionally while collapsing personally. Imagine reaching one of the highest points of your career, only to find out your marriage was falling apart in front of the world. Then came Gabriel Aubry. Younger, handsome, model-level striking, and for a moment it looked like Halle had found a softer chapter. They had a daughter together. The public saw the pictures, the smiles, the fantasy of healing. But when that relationship ended, the aftermath became bitter and complicated. Custody battles, court headlines, public tension. Then Olivier Martinez entered the story. Another passionate romance. Another marriage. Another child. Another ending. And once again the world looked at Halle and said, "See? There she goes again." But that sentence hides something ugly. Because people were not saying, "Why do powerful women face complicated relationships?" They were saying, "Why is she the problem?" And that distinction matters. Because by the time Van Hunt entered Halle's life, the public had already written her romantic obituary. People assumed she would either stay single forever or continue repeating the same painful cycle. But Halle shocked everyone. She said she had done the work. She said she had spent years alone. She said she had raised her standards. And suddenly, the same woman people accused of being unable to keep love was saying something much more powerful. "Maybe I finally learned how to stop accepting less than I deserve." But the internet wasn't done with her. Because once Halle appeared happy, the old rumors came crawling back. The age gap conversations. The younger men gossip. The claims that she always chose men who couldn't handle her power. And the question became louder than ever. Was Halle Berry's love life a series of failures? Or was it a long, painful road toward finally choosing herself? The latest wave of drama didn't begin with a courtroom. It didn't begin with a public fight. It began with a sentence. A simple, sharp, unforgettable sentence that cut through decades of gossip. Who says I wanted to keep the wrong man? That one idea changed everything. Because suddenly the public narrative flipped. For years, Halle had been treated like the common denominator in her failed relationships. Every divorce, every breakup, every custody dispute was used as evidence against her. But when she pushed back, people started asking a different question. What if Halle wasn't failing to hold on to love? What if Halle was escaping situations that no longer served her? That is where the first major twist comes in. Because the internet had built an entire story around Halle being hard to love. But her own words suggested something else. Maybe she had spent years learning the difference between love and survival. And that hit people hard. Clips began circulating of Halle discussing loneliness, healing, self-work, and the pain of believing that real love might never happen for her. Fans started connecting the dots. One comment read, "Maybe Halle didn't lose men. Maybe those men lost access to her." Another said, "She was never unable to keep a man. She was unwilling to keep the wrong one." But not everyone was supportive. Critics immediately fired back, saying the pattern was too long to ignore. They pointed to multiple marriages, breakups, legal battles, and emotional interviews. They claimed there had to be something deeper going on. And that is where the conversation turned darker. People began revisiting Halle's childhood trauma, including her past comments about witnessing abuse and growing up with instability. Suddenly, the gossip stopped being just gossip. It became psychological speculation. Was Halle choosing emotionally unavailable men? Was she repeating old wounds? Was she trying to rewrite childhood pain through adult relationships? Now, to be clear, nobody outside her life can diagnose her. But the public conversation became intense because Halle herself has acknowledged that early trauma shaped her sense of self-worth. And that admission made people look at her relationships differently. Not as scandals, but as symptoms of a deeper battle. A battle between the woman Hollywood worshipped and the wounded girl who once believed she wasn't enough. That contrast is what made the story explode. Because Halle Berry to the world was untouchable. But emotionally, she had admitted she was human. And that humanity became the real twist. The woman millions envied had spent years searching for love, safety, and emotional peace. And maybe the tragedy wasn't that she couldn't keep a man. Maybe the tragedy was that people expected her to keep suffering quietly just to prove she was lovable. But then came the second wave of backlash. Because some critics weren't ready to let go of the old narrative. They said, fine, maybe the men were wrong. But why did she keep choosing them? And that question opened the door to the most controversial part of the conversation. Halle Berry's alleged pattern of choosing younger, less established, or emotionally mismatched men. And once that topic entered the chat, the internet lost control. The younger men conversation became the gasoline. Because nothing makes the internet spiral faster than age gaps, beauty, power, and celebrity romance. People began comparing Halle's relationships, separating the men into categories. The famous ones, the athletes, the musicians, the models, the actors, and the younger partners who became part of the public fascination. But here's where the narrative gets complicated. The claim that Halle mostly dated much younger men is not completely accurate. Some of her major relationships were with men close to her age. But that didn't stop the internet from focusing on the examples that fit the most dramatic story. Gabriel Aubry was younger. Alex da Kid was much younger. And once those names started trending in commentary circles, people began asking whether Halle was drawn to youth, admiration, escape, or a certain kind of emotional imbalance. Supporters said the criticism was hypocritical. They pointed out that older male celebrities date younger women constantly and rarely face the same moral panic. But when Halle Berry is linked to younger men, suddenly people act like it reveals some deep flaw. One fan post summed it up perfectly. When older men date younger women, it's normal. When Halle Berry dates younger men, suddenly everyone becomes a therapist. That comment went viral because it exposed the double standard. But critics had their own argument. They said Halle's history wasn't just about age. It was about intensity. The romances seemed passionate, fast, glamorous, and then suddenly chaotic. And that is where the emotional stakes rose again, because Van Hunt changed the pattern. He wasn't a flashy young model using Hollywood proximity as a headline. He was a mature artist closer to Halle's age, with his own identity, his own career, and his own calm presence. And Halle described this relationship differently. Not as a storm. Not as chaos. Not as a rescue fantasy. But as peace. That word matters. Peace. For a woman whose love life had been turned into public entertainment, peace was the most shocking plot twist of all. But the internet being the internet, peace did not stop the speculation. Instead, it created a new question. If Van Hunt is different, does that mean Halle finally broke the cycle? Or is this just the quiet before another public heartbreak? That question split fans into two camps. One side celebrated her engagement and said she deserved happiness after years of pain. The other side said her track record made them skeptical. And then came the most emotional layer of the whole story. Halle admitting she once thought love might not be for her. That confession hit like a punch. Because behind all the glamour was a woman who had considered giving up on romance entirely. A woman who had been alone. A woman who had done the inner work. A woman who had raised the bar so high that she refused to settle again. And when Van appeared, she said he matched what she had finally learned to require. That is why this story resonates. It is not just about Halle Berry. It is about every person who kept choosing wrong because they had not yet healed enough to choose right. It is about every woman called difficult for having standards. It is about every person who walked away and was blamed for not staying. But just when the narrative started becoming empowering, the haters came back harder. They accused her of rewriting history. They said she was using healing language to avoid accountability. They claimed every failed relationship has two sides. And that statement brought the drama to a dangerous new level. Because once people started demanding the other side, old interviews, old accusations, old legal disputes, and old wounds were dragged back into the spotlight. And suddenly, Halle's past was no longer past. It was trending again. Social media exploded into a full-blown battlefield. On one side, Halle's supporters were furious. They argued that the public had spent decades punishing Halle for refusing to stay in broken relationships. They said society loves to romanticize suffering women, but the moment a woman leaves, she becomes the villain. One viral style comment captured that frustration. Halle Berry didn't fail at love. She survived public heartbreak and kept going. Another fan wrote, "She owes nobody a perfect marriage record. She owes herself peace." But critics were just as loud. They argued that nobody has that many public romantic disasters without playing some role in the pattern. They said fans were turning Halle into a victim and ignoring the complexity of adult relationships. That debate became ugly fast. Some people focused on her beauty. Some focused on her age. Some focused on her children. Some focused on her exes. And some simply wanted to use Halle's life as a morality play about women, aging, and romance. That is where the conversation became bigger than one celebrity. Because Halle Berry became a symbol. To some people, she represented the woman who refused to settle. To others, she represented the danger of unresolved trauma. To some, she was proof that beauty does not guarantee emotional safety. To others, she was proof that society hates when beautiful women age, choose, leave, and still remain desirable. And then came the industry reaction. Hollywood insiders, commentators, podcast hosts, and entertainment blogs began framing Halle's current relationship with Van Hunt as a final chapter romance. But that phrase bothered people. Final chapter? Why does a woman approaching 60 have to be treated like her life is wrapping up? Why can't this simply be a new chapter? That question sparked another wave of emotional support. Fans began pointing out that Halle finding love later in life is not tragic. It is powerful. She did not find peace because she was lucky. She found it because she waited, healed, rejected less, and stopped performing perfection for an audience that never protected her anyway. Still, the skeptics were watching closely. Every public appearance with Van became evidence. Every caption became a clue. Every delayed wedding detail became a conspiracy. If they smiled, people analyzed it. If they were quiet, people called it suspicious. If they joked about marriage, people said something was wrong. And that is the price of being Halle Berry. Even happiness gets cross-examined. But the most revealing reaction came from women who said they saw themselves in her story. Women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s began commenting that Halle's journey gave them hope. Not because it was perfect, because it was imperfect. Because she had been divorced, embarrassed, judged, and still had the courage to believe love could exist again. And that is when the narrative shifted once more. This was no longer just about younger men. It was about whether women are allowed to have complicated pasts and still deserve beautiful futures. And just as the conversation seemed to be turning in Halle's favor, one final question started circulating. If Halle has really healed, why are people still so desperate to prove she has not? That question may be the real scandal. Because maybe the public never wanted Halle Berry to find peace. Maybe they wanted her to remain the cautionary tale. And if that is true, then the next twist is even more disturbing. Here is the final twist. The most shocking thing Halle Berry exposed may not be about any man at all. It may be about the audience. For decades, people thought they were analyzing her relationships. But maybe Halle's story has been exposing something about us. Our obsession with blaming women. Our hunger for beautiful people to secretly suffer. Our need to turn heartbreak into entertainment. Our habit of calling women crazy when they are hurt, difficult when they have boundaries, and unlucky when they refuse to settle. That is the mirror Halle Berry holds up. And it is uncomfortable. Because if Halle had stayed with men who betrayed her, disappointed her, or failed to meet her emotionally, people might have called her loyal. But because she left, they called her unstable. That tells us everything. The real scandal is not that Halle Berry had multiple relationships. The real scandal is that people demanded she keep the wrong ones just to protect a fantasy. And now with Van Hunt, the question is no longer, can Halle keep a man? The question is, can the public accept Halle Berry being loved without turning it into a countdown to disaster? Because that is what is happening. Even now, even while she appears happy, people are waiting for the fall. Waiting for the breakup. Waiting for the headline. Waiting to say, we told you so. But what if this time they are wrong? What if this is the relationship that proves Halle was never the problem? What if all those years alone, all that self-work, all that pain, all those endings were leading to one thing? A woman finally choosing peace over performance. But here is where things remain unresolved. There is still no wedding date. There are still old legal issues tied to past relationships. There are still critics watching every move. And there are still unanswered questions about how Halle's past continues to shape her present. So no, this story is not over. Not even close. Because if Halle Berry walks down the aisle, the internet will explode. If she delays the wedding, the internet will explode. If she says one more sentence about her past, the internet will explode. And if any ex responds, this entire conversation could become even bigger. So keep your eyes open. Because Halle Berry's next move may finally silence the critics. Or it may unleash the most dramatic chapter yet. So now I need to hear from you. Do you think Halle Berry has been unfairly judged for decades? Was the can't keep a man narrative always sexist and cruel? Or do you think her relationship history reveals a real pattern that people are afraid to discuss? And what about Van Hunt? Is he truly the peaceful love Halle says she waited for? Or are the skeptics right to question whether this relationship can survive the pressure? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is far from over. And if you want the full breakdown of Halle's marriages, breakups, custody battles, and the public comments that reignited everything, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the moment there is another update, another interview, another public appearance, or another shocking response, we are going to break it all down. And trust me, the next chapter could change everything.